After losing the Super Bowl to the Eagles, the Chiefs have now lost 4 games by 17 points or more with Mahomes as their starting quarterback. 2 of those 4 losses were in Super Bowls. So Super Bowl 59, we just saw that, final score of 40-22. And Super Bowl 55, it was a 22-point margin in a 31-9 loss to the Buccaneers. So after that loss in 2020, there were some key changes made to the team. They drafted center Creed Humphrey. They traded for Orlando Brown Jr., who's now with the Bengals, and they signed Joe Thuney to a 5-year, $80 million contract. Now, they made necessary moves to get back to the Super Bowl. They did have a 1-year hiatus, but then we saw the success that they had after that. So what moves should they make now? Pete Prisco and Danny Kanell here to answer those questions. So they have a tight salary cap. We know that, roughly $1 million over, and quite a lengthy list of free agents when you look at what they have going on there. So what does KC need to do this offseason to get back to that NFL mountaintop, Pete?
Well, I think it starts with developing. And, you know, everybody wants to get rid of the left tackle they drafted last year, Kingsley Sumatia, and they want to get rid of him and say, hey, let's move on. But he wasn't ready to play, but you draft him, you develop him, and so he's got to be ready to play. You can't just go outside every year and pay somebody to play that spot. Wanya Morris is another younger player. So I think they have to get the left tackle position solidified. That's first and foremost. Trey Smith, the right guard's an unrestricted free agent. They have to decide if they're going to bring him back. I would bring him back, find a way to make that happen, and keep your interior guys. As far as the rest of this group, I think Trey Smith will come back. Nick Bolton's a big part of their defense because he calls the signals. They'd love to have him back, but that price gets a little out of whack. He goes. I think Justin Reed's up in the years. They drafted a kid last year, Jaden Hicks, out of Washington State, who I think is ready to take his spot. Marquise Brown, look, he didn't do a lot last year because he was hurt, so they figured out a way. They get Rashee Rice back, and now you get him going again, so I think he goes outdoor as well. I think the biggest thing they have to do, they have to get better at left tackle. Now, if you draft a guy in the second round, you clearly think he's going to be that guy. Now you have to develop him.
Yeah, I mean, it was a revolving door at left tackle last year, and they tried him, and it often happens. I mean, you're a young player, you're a rookie, there's a big jump that you have to make, so I agree with you there, but I think you have to have a pretty solid backup option, too, whether that's somebody they sign that's a veteran in the free agent market. But I think you saw, and Jenny brought it up, like they made that adjustment after the last Super Bowl, looked at the offensive line and said, we have the best quarterback in the game right now, but it doesn't matter how good you are, you have to protect him. I also think they need to add another piece to the wide receiving corps. Xavier Worthy was a ninth find, and we saw him develop on the back end of the year and really become a difference maker for them. But some of that wide receiving core is getting older, and we saw some of the list there of players they're going to lose, and others like Juju Smith-Schuster who just are getting up there in age. Like to see them maybe draft somebody there, and then somebody to give Chris Jones and they're on defensive line some help getting after the passer. One thing you watched was when Patrick Mahomes was running for his life, Jalen Hurts had all day to throw. So I'd like to see them add somebody as a pass rusher on the defensive side of the ball.
If Trey Smith leaves and they decide they don't want to pay him the big deal, there are guards on the market you can bring in, and bring him in short-term deals that kind of will let them, you know, Zach Martin's going to be on the market. I mean, do you want to get a veteran like that? If you wanted to go veteran left tackle to solidify that group, maybe Tyron Smith, you get the Cowboys band together and let them play right guard and left tackle. So there are options out there for them. Whatever they do, #1 priority has to be solidifying the offensive line.
Solidify and develop. They do have 4 picks in the top 100 in this year's draft as well, so they can get some talent out there in that capacity. Now, we also have the situation we have to mention with Travis Kelce out there saying he needs a little bit of time to think about his NFL future. How do the Chiefs kind of handle this decision with their star? What do they need to do? Do they just sit back and just wait for Kelce to make this choice?
And probably get on their hands and knees and hope he retires. I mean, no. I mean, look, he's not the same player. He clearly is not. And I thought in the Super Bowl that there were times where he didn't give the utmost effort in certain situations, and that's never a good look. So I think maybe he realizes it's time and he walks away from it, because he's not the same player. He doesn't scare anybody down the field. He doesn't have the suddenness that he used to play with. So what do? I think if he retires, they have guys. They drafted Wiley out of TCU, who's a kid I really like. I think he has a chance to be a guy who can be a productive tight end for him. So I think in the ideal world, Kelce's done. They move on from him.
This is where they have to have great communication with Travis Kelce. Jenny, yourself, what do they do? I think they do need to give him his time. Let him say, hey, take your time, catch your breath. To me, he looked burned out. whether it was on the field, whether it was in media night earlier in the week when he was getting tired of the Taylor Swift questions, which I get. He must get those everywhere he goes. But then the effort on the field was almost inexplicable from a player of his caliber, where he did look slow, but there was effort issues on some of the pass blocking.
He admitted it kind of after this. There
were times when he was just standing around.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think it should be noted that at his age 35, you've already had a lot of wear and tear in your body, and the success they've had has allowed them to play so many more games than most other players are playing at his age. So he's already getting 3 or 4 more games every season. This is your 3rd Super Bowl in a row. He's got a lot of wear and tear on him. I think he has to make clear to himself that he is mentally invested in coming back for another year if he wants to do that.
Yeah, how committed is he to the offseason? Because he does a lot of stuff in the offseason now, and he doesn't look like he's in the greatest shape in the world. The other thing is in the playoffs, we always counted on him. Well, we saw him against the Texans and say, okay, it's playoff time, here goes Kelsey. Then he disappeared. He didn't do anything for the next 2 games. So that's a major worry when you get to be that age.
Getting old, getting up there.
Yeah,
got to make some tough decisions. We're going to look at the Chargers next. So a top 5 defense with holes to fill this offseason. Edge rusher Khalil Mack, he would have been a good candidate for that franchise tag, but there is language in his contract that they can't tag him. So where do they begin, Pete?
Well, I think this is another team that has to look at the interior of their offensive line. They got the 2 tackles. Slater is outstanding at left tackle. They drafted Alt to be the right tackle. He's going to be a really good one. But the interior had problems. And I think if they want to run the ball, they have to be more physical inside. And I think that's something we'll look at. You talk about the running back position. How do they run the ball? Dobbins is an unrestricted free agent, did some good things for him, but is he the long-term answer? What do? Do they go in the free agency and sign one? There's some talk of Harris from the Steelers. You go in there and maybe being that brutish running back that Jim Harbaugh and that group would like to have. So I think they need to get physical in the middle of that line, run the ball better. And on the other side of the ball, they need to stop the run. They did a better job of it, but they're never that big on the defensive line. They're always small. So they have a tendency to get pushed around sometimes in key games.
I think this is a good draft for defensive line, pass rusher, edge talent. So if it's selected at 22, that could be an option for him there. I agree with you. And when I go back to what they potentially will address, you mentioned, remember Jim Harbaugh last year when he was talking about the offensive line? Remember how passionate he got about it, like tip of the spear, and he was so emotional, gave this impassioned speech? You're right, Pete. They got the outside taken care of. Now it's time to take care of the interior of that offensive line, because that does seem to me fundamentally what Harbaugh wants to do is run the football, be physical, and I think it starts up front. They
got to tick over $63 million in salary cap space out there, and Pete, you touched upon this. So if you look at the offensive line and the offensive side of the ball, Ladd McConkey really was a star for this team, but Justin Herbert does need some more weapons. So you touched upon it, but who are some more targets that they can get to kind of get their rush-heavy offense going?
Well, if you wanted to go in that direction, which I wouldn't, by the way, I'd wait to the draft. I think the draft is loaded with running backs. I think you can get good ones in the 3rd and 4th round, so I wouldn't go out and pay big money for any of these guys. If they're going to come on a team-friendly deal, I'd be intrigued by Harris in that situation. He's more of a plotter, and I think that's what Harbaugh really wants to do with that offense, is become a plotting offense. That's not my preference. If I'm the Chargers, I'd get somebody who can, catch the ball out of the backfield, be a factor, rip off long runs, and kind of take the pressure off of Herbert a little bit, because they have to run the ball consistently better than they have run it.
I'd be curious how because I don't think they should. I know you're going to be against the philosophy of paying a running back top-tier money in the free agent market, but what about taking a running back at 22 in the 1st round, where you get the rookie contract for 5 years? If Ashton Genty's sitting there at a 22,
he won't be, though, I don't think.
That's the dilemma. If you can get Travion Henderson, who's, again, he's split reps. I think if Genty's there, it's a no-brainer, but I do think it becomes a little bit more trickier if you have that 22nd pick and there's, Genty's off the board. Do you still take a running back?
See, what I would do is I would wait until the 3rd round to take her. I think this is a deep running back class. I mean, you know it. There's a ton of them in the. Judkins is in the class, and he, guys like that. You can find running backs in the 3rd round who will come in and contribute right away. You draft them.
Genty's the only guy I would consider at the 1st round. I think he's the type of difference maker where I do think there comes when there's guys that are available, like a Bijan Robinson, like a Saquon Barkley. Those guys were top 5 picks, but I think Genty is that caliber.
And you know what? They were top 5 picks. How the Falcons done with their top 5 running back pick? Right. How did the Giants do with their top 5 running back pick? I mean, and the Lions, they drafted Gibbs high in the 1st round, and everybody, we rave about him. He's a great player, but I don't think they've sniffed this. I mean, they've been in the Super Bowl yet with him, have they?
No.
And so I I don't look. You can find running backs. You can draft them. Here's where the problem comes into play: value of pick and position. And the reason I say that is a running back in year 5, year 6 is an old guy. A tackle in year 8 or 9 is in the prime. Yeah. That's the biggest difference. So that's why you look for different positions.
Love your philosophy on running backs, Pete.
Draft them, develop them, run them into the ground, and get another one. But don't draft them in the first round.
Yes. All right, we're going to move on to the Broncos now. They're really in their prime winning window with their rookie quarterback and Bo Nix over there. You would imagine that getting him like a quality tight end or another proven receiver would be helpful. But where do they need to get the most help there, Pete?
Well, I think, you mentioned the tight end. I think that's something that they'll look at. But also, you keep hearing Sean Payton talk about the Joker. And the Joker is the guy who can do so many different things. And a guy you can put it, Deebo Samuel was a Joker in his heyday. He was a guy you could line up in different spots, play receiver, play running back, get him out of the backfield.
If you will.
Tyler Warren would be a great pick for the Denver Broncos. He won't be there when they pick, but he would be a great pick for the Denver Broncos. Somebody along those lines, a guy they can move around, create matchup problems, make it a little bit easier for Bo Nix. I think that's somebody you can really, really add to that offense.
I think of a guy like Luther Burden out of Missouri, who's more of a slot guy, gadget player, if you will, Joker, that type of player. I think he'd be a good fit. I also think they do need to add some weapon that they can work with, because Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims are nice, but they're by far from being an elite crew of wide receivers. And a lot of the quarterbacks we've seen have success, Jalen Hurts is a great example. Look at the receivers he's got on the outside. And especially with a quarterback who's young and developing, you've got to give him better weapons.
But they have Franklin, and they, so they have some youth there. I think they'll be okay at wide receiver. They do need linebackers too. They have some issues there, injury issues. And Barton, as you saw there, is an unrestricted free agent. He played a lot.
I want to throw up that free agents list as well, just real quick. They have a sizable list of looming free agents that are on there. Javonte Williams, DJ Jones. How do you think they handle kind of these players?
Well, McMillan's been their slot corner. They might go for an upgrade there, but I think they might try and bring him back. Barton, look, he was a fill-in anyways. They had guys get hurt. I think he's going to be out the door. I think Jones they'd like to bring back. I think he will come back. Zach Wilson, look, you're a backup quarterback.
Right.
He likes playing there. He's friendly with Bo Nix. I would imagine they would bring him back.
Yep.
You agree?
Yeah, I do. Right. Javonte Williams, another one. You don't want to pay the running back a ton of money. They could draft somebody.
And he hasn't looked like the same guy. Yeah. I mean, you hate to say that, but since his injury, he hasn't been the same guy.
We're going to move on. Last but not least, we got the Las Vegas Raiders. They got Tom Brady helping out in the front office. They got money to spend. They have a glaring hole at quarterback. So, Pete, how do they fix it? Where do they fix it?
Well, I think they're going to look at Sam Darnold. I think that's something to keep an eye on. What do the Vikings do with him? If I'm the Vikings, I probably wouldn't just let him leave without any kind of compensation. I'd try and figure that out. But I think they have to get a quarterback. Look at this group. It's a who's who of how not to. That's what that is. I mean, look, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, and Desmond Ridder. That ain't exactly a murderer's row when it comes to the quarterback position. So I think they have to figure out what they're going to do at quarterback. The question becomes, do they nose around Matt Stafford? I mean, that's a possibility. If you're the Raiders, you have to look at that. Also, Aaron Rodgers is out there. He's a West Coast guy. So
how far down the list is Aaron Rodgers in the first phone calls that these guys are making?
Well, I think the first phone call they make will be to Matt Stafford to see if they can get that done. The second one would be to see what the price is on Sam Darnold, and the third one would be to Aaron Rodgers, because you're not giving up anything for him, and you're probably not going to have to pay him that much money. I think Rodgers at the end of last year started to look like Aaron Rodgers a little bit. Remember, that injury was far worse than he let on. He was clearly impacted by it early in the season, and I think as the season went on, he got better. And that's not to say, he's 40 years old. It's not to say it's just going to carry over. But I did see some things at the end of last season that would lead me to believe he's still better than what they have right now. I can tell you that right now.
So if you went that route and got one of these top free agents, are you passing on QB at 6, or are you going to go both? Like if you went Sam Darnold, who's probably going to command pretty top dollar, or Aaron Rodgers, or Matthew Stafford, where you're going to have to give up some trade value, will you then, that's your quarterback for the next 2 or 3 years, you deal with that later? Because I went the mindset of you bring in a Daniel Jones, some guy that's clearly a bridge quarterback, and then you drafted Shador, who's.
But how do you know he's going to be there, though?
At 6.
Well, that's the risk you have to run.
Right.
Then
you're stuck with Daniel Jones being your quarterback for the next year.
Right.
I mean, because ideally you bring Daniel Jones in that scenario and you play him for 8 games and then you put Shador Sanders in. But you don't know if you're going to get Shador Sanders, so you might need to make a move.
I will say, you'd have to move up.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it worth trading up at that point?
And here's the other part of that equation. How good is Shedeur Sanders?
We don't know.
We don't know.
But you got to speculate on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, just doing my first work on these quarterbacks, there were probably 4 or 5 in last year's draft that I would take it ahead of both of them, to be honest with you.
Yeah. There's only one quarterback in this class that I think is top 5 worthy, and it's Cam Ward. It's not Shedeur Sanders.
And I don't love him.
Yeah. He's a little erratic.
Little loose with the football.
Yes, he is.
Got to get some more QBs out there. Danny, you want to come out of retirement?
Well, don't forget, they're going to push Jackson Dart up the board. They're going to go get Kyle McCord up the board. Don't worry, everybody's desperate for quarterbacks. These guys are going to get pushed up the board.
You guys don't go anywhere. We're looking at the Super Bowl odds for next season. The Eagles, the early favorite at 650 as they look to win their 2nd consecutive bowl. Then right behind them, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Ravens. Then we've also got the Bills right at plus 750, then the Lions and the Niners. Then the list starts dwindling from there.
Bills go get Myles Garrett. They're going to move way up that list.
Ooh, yeah, they would.
Coming up next, we're going from the AFC to the NFC. The Niners with such a roller coaster 2 seasons, hoping to get back on top, looking at this offseason needs, where teams can improve. That's after the break.